Welcome to the Movement with Steven Sashin.
And with Chris Duffin.
Wait, I'm confused. So are we talking feet today or are we going to talk butts? I'm all mixed up now.
So that was because of something we said privately before here. And just because you're holding up a foot skeleton, that doesn't mean I'm supposed to hold up a butt related something.
Okay.
So let's just move on.
We can stay on topic for sure.
No, we can't, but that's a different story altogether. Do you want to tell people why we're doing this and why we're doing this together?
Yeah. So we today are going to talk about Olympic weightlifting shoes and the use of squatting and general. People get confused weightlifting, thinking it's the term of everything with regards to lifting weights in the gym, when Olympic weightlifting is a sport, just like golf and soccer, and has a specific set of things, and it has some very specific movements. There's shoes within that, and those get used in a proliferation of other things. We're going to talk about that. There actually happened to be a recent friend of mine, someone that we both follow, Dr. Mike Israetel, that did a video on this just a few days ago. We were already planning on doing a video on this, so this isn't really a response video in any way or form, but has certainly added to the context and discussion. So why are the two of us talking about this? Stephen, what?
Well, wait. So first I'm going to do the Reader's Digest version of what you just said. So whenever people take up some new sport, especially one involving moving your body, the question is always, what equipment do I need? And when it comes to lifting weights, people often think, hey, I need squat shoes. You go to a CrossFit gym, you'll see a whole bunch of them. And so when I was thinking about this and it came up in some conversation, I knew the best person to talk to was you. And not surprisingly, we had very similar opinions about this. And yes, as you said, our friend Mike Israetel did a little something about this, and we'll dive into that. So that's what we're talking about. Now let's talk about the who we are and why. Here, I'm going to do me first, only because your cred is much more interesting in this world. So I'm Steven Sashin, co-founder. I was co-CEO, but now my wife is CEO, and I have a new title. I am the Chief Barefoot Officer at ZeroShoes.com. We make footwear designed for human feet, and we've been doing this for about 14 and a half years. We have a complete line of shoes, boots, and sandals for casual and performance use that people use for everything from taking a walk to running marathons to playing basketball in the NBA. We might talk about that briefly. And we're at ZeroShoes.com. Off to you.
All right. So I'm Chris Duffin. I'm an inventor and an author around things related to human resilience. The things that I've developed are used in nearly every professional sports team in North America, close to 1,000 colleges, all branches of the military, even the White House. When I talk about physical resilience, I've lifted a lot of weights in the past, so I was known for that. Did a 1,000-pound squat for reps and a 1,000-pound deadlift for reps, which is unique, especially considering my weight when I did it. But I'm very passionate about the subjects of human resilience. That passion developed in my very unique upbringing when I developed a lot of mental models around how to use challenge and the struggles around us in all realms to become stronger and more resilient and capable human being. So here we are today.
I left out.
And so I own a part of Kabuki Strength, premier equipment provider related to biomechanics, as well as Barefoot Shoes, BEAR. And I guess we'd say Steve and I are somewhat competitors, but I don't know, it doesn't really matter in our views of things. No. We do, yeah.
No, we both hold the belief that the more the merrier. And in fact, I missed you at the Barefoot Shoe Expo 2 weekends ago. That was super, super fun with a couple thousand people who showed up walking around crying and thanking us for what we've done for their lives. Hey, I didn't leave out my only bit of street cred. Currently, I'm a Masters All-American sprinter, which I have been for the last 15 years. So that means for men in my age group, I'm one of like the 20 the fastest guys in the country. So does not hold a candle to lifting thousands of pounds over and over. But hey, it's something for a 62-year-old short guy.
Yeah. What races do you run?
100-meter outdoor, 60-meter indoor.
Nice. What's your times on those?
Well, the season just started, so I don't know yet. In theory, as you get older, things get slower, but I had some improvements to my form recently that feel like I'm faster, so I'm looking forward to the first time race in just a couple of weeks.
I know you put on some additional strength, too, you were talking about, or at least some hypertrophy of the running muscles.
Yes, I have worked on the running muscles. You can debate what those are. So
that's why I left that as that.
Yeah, I don't want to get into that. So anyway, yeah, I'm looking forward to this season to see what happens. Last time I ran indoors, I ran the 60 in about 8.5, which is All-American time for people 5 years younger than me. So I was pretty happy about that. So
Nice,
anyway,
nice.
let's go on to the thing. So what started, I don't remember what was the thing that inspired me to reach out to you and say, hey, I have some opinions about squat shoes. And if anybody's going to know more about this, it's you. And we started chatting. So let's dive into that. And why don't we start with this simple thing? Do you have any idea? Well, let's describe what they are, and then we can talk about history and applications.
Yeah, yeah. So a squat shoe, it's actually not a squat shoe, and it's an
True.
Olympic lifting
But
shoe.
I say, but
Uh,
in the same way that what we make are not technically barefoot shoes, because that is quote an oxymoron. You can't be barefoot and in shoes. Squat shoe is just, it's just the term that people use more often, especially when they're not Olympic lifters, aka Ollie lifters.
yes, exactly. So it is a shoe with a significant heel raise in it. It's very solid, which you do need a solid base within any lifting environment if you're going to maximize your performance. And the goal of that is to be able to get in a position. So when you're throwing a weight up overhead with a snatch, so from the floor up and
Wait,
above
hey,
your
we're
head.
not there yet. Let's just do.
Oh, yeah,
Let's stay on the anatomy of the
yeah,
squat shoe.
yeah.
So
So yeah,
elevated heels, stiff sole,
elevated
typically
heels.
often made of wood or something
Yep.
approximating wood. One thing that's important for you and I is they tend to have pointy toe boxes.
Yes.
They're again very very stiff. They lock your foot down into the shoe arguably nicely, but I can't remember what, if anything, are they doing for any traction on the ground itself.
The primary piece of the shoe is the elevation,
Yeah.
right? If you don't have those and you're trying to do those movements, people often stand on a weight or something like that. They're trying to get in a better position where they would lack mobility due to ankle dorsiflexion to be able to get into the positions to perform lifts, to make it easier.
So, but backing up a half a step, do you know why or when the first squat shoe came out, or how that all started?
I did pull up the history on that when we first started doing
Yeah,
the
yeah, I did.
plan on this. Before I canceled on you, I think 3 times. For context of my constant canceling on Steven, I had a pretty challenging month with my mother passing and
Yeah,
a few other things going on. And I do not remember the Olympic lifting did start without the shoe,
yeah.
and then that was something that came later, and it came after. Originally, people were doing more of the split catch snatches, and something around the evolution of that, there was some timing that was when the shoes came in, I believe. I'm not an expert in this
Nor,
area,
yeah,
so
nor I. And I looked it up as well. And similarly, if I was smarter, I would have pulled up whatever link it was I sent to you. So what someone told me was that there was some early lifter, and I don't remember if it was a something that he made to accommodate the fact that he had either longer femurs or shorter femurs. I don't recall which, and I can't seem to get in my head which would make sense if either of those. But let's just say, like many things, something caught on in one world and then everyone just assumed, and arguably for a particular type of person, and then it just expanded. Now anyone who's lifting anything, whether they're doing Olympic lifting or if they're just deadlifting or squatting in a CrossFit gym or whatever else, it's like, oh, you've got to have these and you have to have that heel lift. And why would that heel lift be important? Let's do it this way. Why would that heel lift be important for people doing Olympic lifting, and why would it be completely useless for anybody not?
yeah. So you can do Olympic lifting without it. And there are some top level, top placing world athletes doing it. There's a number of tremendous CrossFit athletes doing Olympic lifting movement and competing at a high level without wearing Olympic lifting shoes. So let's clarify that. But the positions in that are very sport specific. They are very demanding of ankle mobility, particularly given limb lengths can play a role in that, making that much worse. So again, if we get into sport specific type things, there's always some level of, is that the reality of the way we function within the world, right? So saying that that's a reasonable shoe to wear in that environment does not mean that should be across the board as you
Right.
lift weights per se. We're talking about an overhead movement with several hundred pounds directly overhead coming off the floor. And that is something that does put a lot of challenge on that. And so those people want to maximize the results. It's about moving that weight as best as possible within that, not the context of their overall physical development, not the context of their overall athletic development and injury risk. It is, how do I maximize that? And that means Being an athlete doesn't mean being healthy. It doesn't mean being safe. It means winning.
Accomplishing your goal. Yeah.
Exactly. And
Well,
anything that's going to help accomplish that goal is going to be positive.
so there's two things that pop through my mind. One is in the running world, there's the same thing. Everyone's, oh, I got to get those super shoes, those highly cushioned maximalist super shoes with a carbon plate. And I'm actually going to do a video about this. I don't know if you've seen these videos where it's referred to as two cameras, one light. So it's you're looking to the left and you say something, and then it's you in a different outfit looking to the right that's talking with yourself basically. And I'm going to do once, hey, I got a marathon coming up and I wonder which of these super shoes should I get? And then it's me on the other side going, well, I don't know. Are you a 110-pound Kenyan running a 2-hour and slightly over 2-hour marathon? No. Well, that's who they're made for. So in a similar vein, people are wearing some of those shoes. And let's say you're one of the top 5 runners in the world. And one day, one of the guys who, you're neck and neck with shows up in a new pair of shoes and he beats you. What do you think you're going to buy the next day? And so I think there's some of that with lifting shoes as well. Like someone did well and everyone started doing it, and then it becomes somewhat ubiquitous. But highlighting two things, and the third point that occurred to me that I hadn't thought of before that you'll get a kick out of. So when you are, again, in that position where you've got a whole bunch of weight over your head, a whole bunch of weight over your head, and the proper form, your shoulders are slightly hyperextended. And if you don't have the right ankle mobility, which you mentioned, then to balance that slight overextension by elevating your heels could be advantageous for some people. And so that's the geometry. But I was just thinking about the clean.
Yeah, because you're actually going, so people may not realize this, but to lock that in, you're going into quite a bit of flexion with the shoulder. That's the very far overhead, almost a little bit behind you. And you'll see the same thing in strongman athletes. That's another one where we'll see. And I do promote the use, or maybe not promote, but I have no argument against, and I see the evidence of why doing an overhead lift, an overhead press of 500 pounds, 400 pounds, what these incredible human beings do. And you have to go into that flexion. If you've got it out in front, you've got a whole lot more of your triceps, your pec, you're risking injury of maintaining that position, being leaned back, which leaning back like that it's going to put a lot of more stress on the extension within the disc, right?
Yep.
So being able to get into this nice flexion of the shoulder to get in that position, if we elevate the heels, it's going to drive your pelvis forward, lock you back into that back position much easier.
Well, here's the thing that struck me as so funny, though. If you are doing a clean and jerk, when you've done the clean, and often you're sitting there with the bar in front of you, basically on your shoulders, for lack of a better term, and you're squatting down because you had to squat to get the bar or to get under the bar. Ironically, it seems to me that would be the time where you don't want your heels elevated, because that would be shoving you forward. So where you get the advantage in the lockout at the last part of the lift, you're having a disadvantage at the beginning of that lift.
Yes, exactly. So just like raising a heel, if you're doing a snatch, you're still deadlifting the bar off the ground, right?
Right.
But you're much physically stronger for that with that given load than you are at the point of the lockout. And the lockout is the key. So you're actually carrying momentum at the lockout. You're not even really strong enough necessarily to get that into position a lot of times.
Right.
You're carrying that through. And so you're balancing your strength through the total movement, right? So yes, you may be disadvantaging other times. But let's just take that example of the strongman doing an overhead press, for example, right? Does that mean I should wear those shoes if I'm doing overhead pressing? Well, no. If I want to overhead press, I want to have as much time on tension of the muscle tissue as possible. And actually being in the lock position is actually when I'm
Relaxed.
not, right? Relaxed. And I'm also behind. It's not actually the pressing movement. So it doesn't necessarily mean if I want to develop pressing ability and pressing strength, should I be putting those on? No, possibly not. It's going to put the back in a little bit more hyperextension. I'm going to have the weight behind me instead of actually pressing in front and engaging those delts and triceps and pecs and things to develop it. And coming up right as I touch lock, but then going right back into the descent of the eccentric to maintain my time under tension on.
That's a very interesting thing. And it looks like because I'm just remembering when the overhead press, or for lack of a better term, a military press, was part of powerlifting, the way that people would cheat that, if you will, is by leaning back. So it was more almost like a bench press without a bench. So you're engaging much more of those muscles, which now it's a very different story. But yeah, as you get to that lockout, getting your arms behind you is going to allow you to lock out. So back to a question number one. So is there anything in a typical Olympic lifting shoe that is about giving you any sort of grip or traction at all?
So I have not worn Olympic lifting shoes.
Me either,
I've
but
only
I saw a pair, but I can't remember. That's why I asked.
no, but I know where you're coming from because that was something that was, I think, addressed in Dr. Mike's video that he hit on
Correct.
quite a bit was the grip retraction. And I did not go do it, as he suggested, looking for barefoot squat accidents. Right.
No, I haven't
But
done that either.
But yeah, there's certainly the sheer gripping force on the floor is substantial.
Yeah.
And I have encountered times when I'm not wearing any shoes that my grip is not good on a synthetic surface where putting my barefoot shoes on, plug, that have the low durometer sole on it has really great gripping power within it. Right. But
I know what he was saying. So Mike's point was that the shoes are giving you, or you have better traction with your foot in the shoe than you would have if your foot was on just whatever surface you're lifting on.
correct.
And
And I would say that is a correct statement in my,
I would say possible. Depends on,
yeah.
because he keeps bringing up the term sweaty feet. So it depends on your feet. If you chalk up your feet, that's going to be a different story. Depending on the surface, is a different story. And depending on, when I got back into sprinting and I said, what do I need for shoes? Everyone said, whatever you buy at a size and a half too small. And I'm guessing the only way you could really lock your foot in fully, other than the straps that people are using in that shoe, is to have something that's squeezing your foot together, which we can dive into how non-optimal that is.
Yeah. And that is an issue too with some of the shoes that will want to roll over. I have experience with what Mike's talking about. And so like when you have those high level of loads and you have maybe a wood or concrete or a slight bit of dust on a rubber floor, and you've got 400 or 500 pounds on, legs slightly spread, maybe to do a squat or deadlift, there's times that, yes, your feet, like if I'm climbing a tree or going over rocks or doing stuff, like my barefoot is the best. But that's because I also have that proprioception, that awareness of my environment, the ability to grip and move and conform my foot. But when I'm on that flat surface with maybe a little bit of something on there, there is time rubber is going to stick to that better, even though I may feel like really great if I'm going to run or something like that on it, but the forces aren't as high as that. So is that a potential issue? Yeah. And I think we've got a number of other potential issues there. Like if we're talking about just wearing no shoes in a gym around an environment where if you were not taking care and cleaning yourself and you've got some potential disease transfer, you're going into the back, I think that in a public environment, in a training space where somebody may be, I would agree that you should put on some zero shoes or some barefoot shoes or something like that, unless it's an environment that people are okay with that, then it's fine as well.
Hold on, getting some disease thing. Well, first of all, I love it when people say that my gym won't let me in there because they say that what happens if I drop a weight on my foot? I go,
the same thing if you have your shoe on.
Exactly.
Yeah, I know.
That little bit of nylon is not going to make a difference. I had that when I walked into a grocery store in bare feet, and they said, you need shoes. I said, why? They said, sanitary purposes. I said, it's cool if my feet get dirty. And they were like, wait, what? I said, oh, wait, do you mean the other way around? Wait, are you suggesting that my feet are dirtier or somehow worse than whatever people have been walking around in their shoes? That seems absurd.
All right, guys, we talk a lot about mental resilience on this podcast, but let's talk about another type of resilience. That's movement resilience. We want to move well, recover better, and do it for life. And it starts with your feet. And you can start today with Naboso. Naboso is a sensory technology company founded by a functional podiatrist. And all their products feature a texture to stimulate, strengthen, and awaken your feet. I use their splay toe spacers and Neuroball to release my feet at the end of every day. They also have these textured recovery socks that feel like a mini massage when you walk around. If you're looking for an effective way to bulletproof your feet, head to naboso.com. That's NABOSO.com and use code RESILIENCE for 20% off.
And how can
I agree with that because it's like, what's the difference of your foot walking on the ground and transferring something?
Right.
Then it makes no logical sense. But I think that there's some societal norms and stuff as well. If it's an environment. I used to be a hardcore in that manner. My gym is shoes optional, and a lot of people choose not to.
Great.
So it has been that way forever.
Well, I'll tell you, one day I was walking into our office and I'm wearing a pair of ratty shorts. My Zero Shoes t-shirt was not as pristine as the one I'm wearing to talk with you. My hair was particularly big on that humid, rarely humid day in Colorado. And I'm in bare feet. And I catch my reflection in the window as I'm walking to the office, and I just stopped dead in my tracks and went, oh, I'm that guy. Oh, so be it. Let's talk about my favorite, and I think perhaps your favorite part as well, which we mentioned, and that is, and well, so hold on one sec, backing up. Was there any
Well,
other?
you had a question like when did it proliferate beyond Olympic lifting? And
Yeah,
so I think more of that started. So powerlifting was a flat soled shoe environment for ages. You look
correct.
back in the 70s and it's boots and Converse, right? People have known not to wear an elevated heel or a running shoe at least. There have been some occasions of people in certain environments wearing that elevated shoe. And I think starting strength, Mark Ripto, I believe he is a promoter of that as well.
Yeah,
And then the CrossFit would also be a role because CrossFit's been pretty closely tied with Olympic lifting.
and
So
to Mark as well.
yeah, so for the last 25 years or 20 years or so, there's been more influences to bring the Olympic lifting shoe in as a squat shoe into these strength sports
Yeah,
and over prior times. So again, so I believe that those are the primary influences. Now, I think we've seen a lot of change within that. We're actually seeing a lot of use of minimalist shoes
correct.
or barefoot shoes, or being barefoot entirely, which is where Mike's video was really against just not wearing any shoes at all.
Right.
And then I think we should apply I do think his view was a bit of a reductionist view as it relates to it because I didn't get fully enough through to see if he was citing any research, but it
I
seemed to be.
I didn't hear any, and in fact, I just realized I've watched a bunch of videos he's done about being on a leg press machine, or not so much on a hack squat, but his leg press machine, where he's basically, if he's not wearing his, again, I'm going to use the term badly, squat shoes, which I think he is. He's also, the foot plate that he's on is angled so that it's also elevating your heel even more.
Yes.
And he's a
Yeah.
big fan of that. And there's reasons where that might be beneficial for the hypertrophic effect that he's looking for in certain muscles, but he's clearly got a preference for this. And while he is often a very research-backed guy, similarly, I don't recall seeing much research on that. In fact, I just found a thing on simplyfaster.com, SIMPLI faster.com, about the science behind weightlifting shoes, and I'm perusing, and by and large, the research is iffy.
Yeah, and actually, I've got a ton of research citations to go through. Typically, I don't go through because it's biomechanics. It doesn't necessarily, it's related to physics, right?
Yeah.
And attachment points. And so there's not necessarily research that needs to go into an engineering discussion
Yeah.
per se, right? And that's where I said I felt for Mike, it was a fairly reductionist kind of view. At the same time, we have to understand perspectives. Mike's looking at this very much from the bodybuilding hypertrophy angle, and we're both looking at this from an athletic development perspective.
Good point.
So these are very different perspectives at the end of the day. But I would also temper that I could go talk to Ben Pekulski, who's
Yeah.
a really known biomechanist, IFBB pro, and
All
he
about
will
barefoot.
100% tell you all about barefoot
Yeah.
or minimalist shoes for these reasons around development. And there's the key thing here is we're developing all the muscles within the foot. And sure, Mike doesn't want a jacked foot. He's already got a jacked forehead, right? So
That was the first semi-mean thing we've said about Mike, who we both adore.
I did that one for the social media snippet. Maybe I just came to me. As soon as I started saying the pulsing jacked forehead. So anyway, yeah, I think understanding the viewpoints is really, really critical here. But again, I know I've had discussions with Ben Pekulski around this, around muscle engagement. And anytime that we can have improved function of a tissue, if I've got a weak foot, I don't believe the tissue is going to work effectively upstream. And we have potential injury mechanisms.
Yeah.
And I could list off a number of pieces of research to do so.
Well, even more if the other thing is, one of the ways that I describe a lifting shoe is you've just taken the floor and put it at an angle. And so one of the other things is that you're not really getting all of the feedback in your feet from feeling anything really, especially with your toes
Yeah.
squeezed together. And that information, that some of that information goes straight from your foot to the base of your spinal cord and back down to your lower extremities to help you figure out how to move. Some of it goes all the way to your brain and back, but some of it's more reflex arc level stuff. And if you're not getting the right neurofeedback, you're not functioning optimally. And maybe just think, we have a couple cycling teams that we've sponsored, and one of them in the early days, after a training ride, that's the word I couldn't find, got out of their cleats and put on our shoes, just a regular sneaker. And one of the guys noticed on his ride home that he was putting up more watts in our shoe than when he was clipped in. And I contended, we still want to prove it, that by actually using your foot, rather than having your foot being a dumb lever, you're not only getting that little bit of extra force possibly, but the biggest thing is you're probably just sending signals up into your, again, spinal cord and back to activate things better and faster. It's a thing.
Yeah. Forset 2011 showed that changing plantar loads and strength can also alter your foot upstream biomechanics as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So there's that thing where I think about how this reminds me a lot of the research that's sort of anti-barefoot or anti-barefoot shoes. They talk about how they've taken people who are used to running in shoes and they've given them time to acclimate to barefoot shoes by having them run in a treadmill for 5 minutes, at which point I facepalm the hell out of myself. It's like, no, that's not getting acclimated. And in a similar vein, I don't think there's been I can't imagine there's been research where it's the right kind of comparison of someone who has gotten used to either condition and seeing how they perform. And of course, there's no way to do a double-blinded test because you can tell if your heels are jacked up or not. So it's such a tricky thing. And I wonder how much is also in the same way that some of the super shoe stuff is placebo, because there are still people winning races who aren't wearing those shoes. I wonder how much of it is when you know you have a shoe that's supposed to improve your performance is improved because of what your brain is doing.
Yeah, more 2016. And this was actually on discussing potentials for wrist development because you have this psychological dependence on the equipment. And this is specific to Olympic lifting shoes, by the way, and the perceived performance enhancement, right? So I think we could extrapolate that. But yeah, it's around increasing athletic performance based on the psychological effects of the shoes.
I had a hard one when I was an All-American gymnast way back when, and I had a TMJ issue. And this is before they were doing TMJ research on athletes. So I was one of the first. This is back in 1976, 77. And so when I got this mouthpiece to adjust my TMJ, that joint, which basically, by the way, it's your jaw. If there's some arguments that if you have your jaw in a particular position, it can either make you weaker or stronger. And I couldn't tell. I was wondering about this when I was in high school, if this was placebo or not, but I could hold an iron cross longer with the mouthpiece in than if I could with it out. And it seemed like it wasn't a placebo effect because I tend to be a bit immune to placebos, but it was interesting.
And you can mimic the same thing by pressing your tongue to the top of your mouth as well. So there's an impact on the diaphragm. And so the diaphragm then thus impacts the stabilization, which then thus impacts the neurological output, right? So this is how improving your bracing methodology, for example, increases your force output because your body quits downregulating due to potential injury risk situations. And that becomes also the same mechanism that we see as it relates to the foot or any unstable environment where we have that slippage or interference, where it's a safety mechanism to reduce your force output, right?
How ironic that training on unstable surfaces became some hip thing, like, ooh, this is going to make you stronger. It's going to work on the, quote, stabilizer muscles, to which I say there are no such thing as stabilizer muscles. They're just muscles. And the research is very clear that training on an unstable surface is not better for building strength than training on something stable because you're not actually using everything fully.
But there are times and places for it as well. I think David Weck has some interesting stuff. I don't buy everything that he says, but he was the inventor of the Bosu ball. And the way that he uses the Bosu ball, I think, is highly effective. The way most people how it got used is a whole other story, right?
Literally upside down.
Yeah.
Well, do we want to say anything more about the problems about squeezing your toes together and the benefits
Yeah, I
not?
do. But I wanted to reference, so this is actually direct to Mike's statement. So Needham et al. 2023, I had this one pulled up.
So
This
glad you
is,
said I have this one pulled up and you weren't just pulling these out of your brain because
nah,
all right, that's pretty good because I can't. I'm horrible at remembering
yeah.
names. So if I have to remember names with the people in the study, I'm out of luck.
Yeah. So it's specific to weightlifting and Olympic shifting shoes. So they allow deeper squats and more upright trunk posture, crucial for lifts like the snatch and clean and jerk. And then I can see where Mike's argument, because Mike is ass-to-grass, full range of motion squatter, right?
Yep.
And so to do the type of lift that he recommends, I could see that being a positive aspect of that.
Well,
Where, like for me, I work with a lot of athletes or strength athletes, and going to your butt on the ground, not often in those environments, certainly not for a competitive squat as well. And that's where we have the other research that I was referring to. Like this is Versec 2023, effects of 4-week Olympic weightlifting training on speed and power performance in recreational athletes may hinder performance in non-lifting activities such as sports requiring agility and speed. Here's another one. This is 1985, but suggests that Olympic lifting shoes, the rigid design of Olympic lifting shoes can increase injury risk during non-lifting activities. Helen, 2017, indicates Olympic lifting shoes may provide significant benefits over other training modalities for experienced athletes. So again, that gets back to my statement again, like how is it helping a strongman with a lockout, but not necessarily helping with those other
right.
pieces. So I think that there's a lot of context around this. I could list off a bunch of other ones as well, but then we get back to having a functional athletic, being able to use everything, change direction, all of this, like the foot itself is incredibly useful. And the Olympic lifting shoes, by the way, the research shows that it can increase plantar pressure, by the way, but not in the way that we're talking, where we need to actually develop and strengthen that tissue by using it. And that tight, do you want to talk about the tight toe? That's very clear research at this point in time about what happens when we pull that large toe in and the restriction of blood flow. We've got
the simplest one is actually here. I can do this one, but I don't know the year. So Katrina Protopopoulos, her research, not so much on squeezing your toes together as arch support, which is related to this actually. We haven't even brought that up, but it occurred to me, where she took healthy people, put arch support in their shoes. They hadn't been wearing it previously. And in 12 weeks, they lost up to 17% of the strength and muscle mass in their foot. And as I like to say, I can't think of a time when weaker is better than stronger. But yes, I think Ridge, when she was at BYU doing the research, just taking that big toe and moving it in the way that it happens when you squeeze your toes into a shoe that's got a pointy toe box, is reducing the ability to use your longitudinal arch and reducing blood flow into your foot as well. The simplest thing, I can do the anecdotal stuff, is getting out of Olympic lifting into powerlifting. We've just seen so many lifters who, when they're able to use their foot by not having their toes squeezed together, are lifting better. We were at one powerlifting competition and a woman's trying on our shoes and they call her for the bench and she's like, "Oh, I got to go. I can't even can I wear these shoes?" And she like runs over and then comes back 2 minutes later saying, "I just had a 20-pound PR because I felt like my feet were screwed into the ground for the first time." And most people who aren't powerlifters don't even realize that a good bench press starts with your feet.
Yeah, so our lifters that are coming at it from your side, wearing minimalist shoes has really started taking over the powerlifting environment.
Yep.
I started pushing this, oh gosh, I can't remember. I think the first big piece I did was an hour and a half at Swiss Society for Weightlifting, Injury Prevention and Sports in 2016, but I've been pushing it for years before that. But we've seen so many top lifters just excelling with working on training their foot using minimalist footwear. And I don't have the research pulled up in this one, but I did a keynote at Parisi, and I think I posted this one online. I've got the research, a bunch of it on my Instagram. I think I'm going to post related to this. But with the restrictive shoes, the lack of plantar or the support of the plantar, not using it, pulling the large toe in, like what we see, I can't remember if the percentage is 96 or 98%, somewhere in that range though. Of all plantar fasciitis cases are not plantar fasciitis.
Correct.
Now, I say that loosely because, there's still an issue, but the issue is due to is atrophied muscle.
Correct.
And degeneration of the tendons as related to that.
Well,
it's lack of use It's a
the
lack
problem.
of use injury. And so everybody's then trying to fix it by finding more orthotics, more support, more lockdown
No.
shoes to give rest to fix it when it is. And this is shown it's shown in ultrasound. It's
Yep.
shown in, what's the other image?
MRI or CAT
The
scan.
MRI,
Yeah.
and they're seeing it in biopsies as well. I think I only pulled the research for the MRIs and ultrasound in the piece, but I've talked to a few doctors that have confirmed this on the biopsies as well. Like it's lack of use. And so we have a significant, as soon as you pull that big toe in, you can imagine, just grab your hand and pull it in. Like what happens? We stop, the blood flow stops happening. We stop using the muscles. And then this is really basic stuff.
Well, everything that you and I talk about is all somewhat self-evident if you think about it and you're not swayed by the misuse of physics and advertising by big shoe companies. But to your point, for most people, and I'll do it this way, they don't have plantar fasciitis. If they have anything, they have plantar fasciosis. So I met a guy, so an itis is an inflammation and osis is a degeneration. And I met a guy once who said, I can't wear your shoes because I've had plantar fasciitis for 20 years. I said, that's not possible. He's like, what are you talking about? My doctor said. So I said, yeah, it's not possible. You can't have an inflammation for 20 years. And he said, well, it went away for a year and a half out of nowhere. I said, yeah, so you don't even have you probably have a little plantar fasciosis, but what you really have is tight calves. He's like, what? I said, yeah, so your calf is pulling on the plantar fascia from the proximal side and it giving you similar symptoms of heel pain, but I bet you don't even have plantar fasciosis. And I've had this happen with, I was at a trade show and I met a guy, special forces guy, 6'5", 260, 6% body fat. The guy was a machine. And he said, we all switched to these minimalist shoes and we got plantar fasciitis. And I took one look at him. I went, I don't think so. He's like, what? I said, can I stick my finger in your calf? He goes, sure. So I could just see the spot from a mile away and I just dug my thumb into it. And this giant guy fell like a tree. And I just sat there rubbing the crap out of his calf for a few minutes. I said, stand up, see how that feels. He goes, holy shit, that's 90% better. I said, right, go back to the base, have your physical therapist do that for a week or so and tell me how it goes. I see him a year later. He goes, well, just so you know, that solved it for everybody. So in addition to your point that most people don't have an inflammation, they have a degeneration. Most of those actually it's also starting from the proximal side, not from the source or the place where they're feeling the pain. And ironically, it's actually one other thing back to arch support. It's the arch support that's also making that happen because, again, if it's just a weakening and non-use, the arch support is there so you don't have to use your plantar fascia. You don't have to use your foot. And it's in there because an elevated heel shoe, by the time your foot hits the ground, you're putting your plantar fascia under strain. And rather than trying to get rid of the elevated heel in the regular shoe as well, the shoe companies went, why don't we just put something in there to immobilize the muscles anyway, so that way they can't overstrain them. It's like, holy crap! I can't even.
No, and that's the original story too. If anybody doesn't know, that's actually what happened.
Oh yeah, you thought I was pulling it out of my butt? No, that's really what happened. Yeah.
Yeah. If we're using the tissue there, we're going to get better engagement. We're going to get better engagement of the tissue around it. Now, the problem with that, like you said, if they all started wearing those and didn't treat it like a strength training program, right. You don't walk into the gym and do 225 for 50 reps your first day, right? And then again your next day and then the next day, right? That's not a training plan. It's progressive, right? It's just like strengthening. The shoe's not the fix. You are the fix.
Yep.
You need to get stronger there. And if you do, you're going to have better engagement of the tissues around it as well. Because why are we starting to lack? I talked about the tongue to the mouth, the diaphragm, like the inhibitions. Well, what else do we do? If we've got weakness around a joint, the body starts restricting mobility around the joint to protect it. So you lose, what do we lose? Ankle dorsiflexion if you've got a weak foot.
Yep.
Shall I say that again? You lose ankle dorsiflexion if you have a weak foot.
So would turn it upside down because most people think, I need these squat shoes because I don't have good ankle dorsiflexion.
Exactly.
By the way, pulling your toes towards your knees. Yeah, they have it upside down.
It's a process, right?
Yeah.
So if I get a strong foot and then I get better engagement of those muscles and the muscle around it, I'm going to reduce my injury risk. I'm also going to have enhanced proprioception, enhanced neuromuscular control, right? I would argue that's going to give you at the end a better hypertrophic effect, which is, I think, where Ben Pakulski stands as well. But I do see this very specific position with these high-depth squats and what Mike's talking about. And again, anybody that's using those type of shoes and seeing success,
do it.
I'm not going to do it.
Yeah.
Do it. Don't remove, but get a stronger foot to put inside of it and minimize the use.
So
wear it
No, now you're onto it. So I was going to say, let's go to a suggestion. This is kind of like what I say to people who are wearing those quote super shoes. I go, cool. If you're going to run in them or race in them, but as soon as you can, get out of them and into something that lets you use your foot naturally and build up strength. And there's research showing that wearing a minimalist shoe, yours or mine, builds foot strength as much as doing an exercise program for your feet. There's research from Isabel Sacco showing that improvement in strength relates or correlates to a 250% reduction in running injuries over the course of a year. So so get your feet strong. Don't stay in something that makes them weak. Get your feet strong, and then you're in a position where you can experiment. And my God, if you got a serious competition coming up, don't do it then. Do it when you got time to do the experiment and see how you feel. And if it feels like you want to make that adjustment because you think it could be better in some way, great. But like in the same way, don't switch to a new pair of shoes the day before a race, even if it's the same shoe you've been wearing.
Yeah. So like I said, so no argument with Mike going, we have a specific shoe that we want to wear this, do that.
Yeah.
But very clear, the more that we use that specialized footwear, and I've quoted the research that I referenced in this discussion, but it will restrict performance and activities in other areas that require high levels of agility and flexibility.
Yep.
It's going to increase your potential injury risk as it relates to that. It increases plantar pressure, leading to potential stress injuries. And again, we talked about too much time, non-use of the foot is going to what? And we've got tons of MRI, imaging,
and
biopsies to show that it's causing atrophy of muscle and tendinopathy issues relating to problems. So, I mean, this is just summarizing this in a short period of time.
Yeah. And even backing up to Mike and to give him credit, there are situations where that would be good. But in the same way that the Olympic lifters were talking about where they might need this product are lifting serious weight. When Mike is working with his serious bodybuilders, these guys are pushing serious weight. This is not your average gym bro who, even with, I mean, my God, like I'm 5', what am I? I'm 5'5", 145, and put me on a leg press with 450 and I can just push that all day long. But I'm fine doing that barefoot. You get your average person who is not lifting that kind of weight or proportionally lifting more. It's my big beef with CrossFit. It's like, wait, I got to deadlift the same thing as a guy who's 6 foot, 195. That doesn't make any sense. But anyway, the point being that even Mike's athletes are not necessarily you, although anybody watching his videos wants to, imagine that they are one of those guys who is in the off season 325 pounds and just a complete monster. So that's actually a whole other comical thing about how, back to my point about being a 105-pound Kenyan, what do you care what that guy's doing? You're not that guy. So there's some of that's still an issue where we want to pretend to be that person and do what they're doing when that's just completely inappropriate from every level I can possibly imagine.
Yeah. So like I said, nothing saying that he's wrong at all in his statements, but we need to look at those with a level of context because they appear to be relating to anyone stepping in the gym to do a squat, which is certainly not the case. We're talking about a very specific goal and adaptation that's needed from that. And in a lot of other environments, it's actually going to be quite disadvantageous. Yeah. So, and there we've come.
Yes. I think we have reached a clear endpoint. Is there anything that we need to say in 1 to 2 sentences tops to wrap it up, or did we just pretty much nail it in 10 to 12 sentences in the last 2 minutes? I got nothing.
Again, this is coming from our perspective, but if we want to think about our long-term musculoskeletal health and our greater training versatility and adaptation, please give those a thoughts, and I think that can help temper at least where we're coming from in this discussion. And I hope that the citations around the research and the discussion around the mechanics side of it helped elucidate where, our viewpoint.
Let's talk about maximizing your strength and resilience. When chasing my 1,000-pound squat, I made my own supplements out of necessity to help push my body to its physical limits. So I founded Build Fast Formula because I needed supplements that actually worked every time I trained. All our formulas are backed by peer-reviewed research and third-party informed sport tested for quality and safety. Listeners can get 10% off by using code RESILIENCE at buildfastformula.com. That's code RESILIENCE for 10% off everything at buildfastformula.com. Find your formula and feel your physicality today.
Yeah, I'm going to just echo that and say beyond lifting, similar thing for people running. If all you're doing is road running, then you're not putting your body under the kind of positive stresses, eustress, that is helpful if you're just doing, single plane movement over and over and over. So get on a trail, do some other things, jump rope, do whatever you can think of that's actually using all those muscles, ligaments, and tendons at different angles, different joint angles, different actual angles from the torque and moment arm perspective, all that physicsy stuff. And I think this is something, what you just said is something people overlook. It's one thing to be able to do that activity that you like. It's another thing to be a well-rounded, healthy person/athlete. And ultimately, we're all athletes. Just some of us do something about it and some of us don't.
Yeah. So stronger feet and ankle complex is going to allow you to work in a lot of different training environments and challenges. And over the course of your life, you're probably going to start engaging in different things. And your ability to move into different sport-specific trainings and needs and be able to adapt to that and push comprehensive training programs and all that, you want to improve your overall athletic performance. And when it comes to long-term musculoskeletal health, strong foot and ankle complexes
Always
lead to better alignment, better load distribution of the lower body, which alleviates stress on joints like knees, hips, low back, when you're doing resistance training.
And
boom,
there's research coming out shortly. I can't cite it specifically because it's not published yet, but I know the lead researcher about balance in the elderly from just wearing minimalist footwear. And the rumor is that the research is going to be very positive for what we've been talking about. So speaking as someone whose father died 9 years ago because he had crabby balance from wearing shitty shoes and tripped on something tiny, fell down, broke his hip, and was dead 2 weeks later, I have a vested interest in helping that go away. And this is another thing, strong feet leading to strong ankles and all the proprioception that goes along with that, and just the neuroreceptive as well. You don't want to lose that, because you don't want to be one of those people who is shuffling, and then you trip on a piece of gum on the sidewalk and then you're done. So think long-term, which is something humans are very bad at, but to the extent that you can, the healthier you are now, the healthier you're going to be when you're at a point where most people aren't.
Yeah.
Cool. So here, let's do the sign off. Point people to your thing. I'll point people to my thing. You go first.
Yeah, you can find all our podcast episodes. I've got a new community, free community that I've got. It's linked on there. Everything's chrisduffin.com. Just go there, type my name in the internet or the socials. I'll pop up. It's not complicated. It's Chris Duffin, like muffin, but with a D, Duffin.
And you can find our stuff in two places. My podcast, this is my joke. Everyone's got a podcast. I'm getting really sick of it. Find out more on my podcast. So we've got the Movement podcast is at www.jointhemovementmovement.com. Nothing you need to do to join. That's just where we have everything. You'll find all the previous episodes, all the places you can engage with us. And of course, you can go to zeroshoes.com to find out more about what we're doing for the footwear that just gets out of the way to let you do what your body and feet are meant to do, like we've been talking about for the last 50 minutes and 53 seconds.
Yeah. That was a good discussion. We kind of wandered around a few things, but I felt we covered it pretty well.
You and me just going on tangents.
Can you imagine that?
Who knew? Thanks,
we
everybody. Did. Okay. Cheers, everyone.